Life coach, yoga, meditation, and spiritual teacher. He's the creator of Karsten Energy Alignment and The Miracle in 3 Breaths. And he's also a performer, director, writer, and producer. So you're so busy, I'm glad you had time to come and see us. So let's give it a go.
Well, first of all, I really want to thank you for inviting me back so soon. I feel like I've just been here and here I am again. And it was really a beautiful drive up and on this beautiful day. And I'm really excited to you today because I'm going to be sharing with you about the hero's journey. How many of you yourselves think of yourself as the hero or the heroine? Maybe a little bit, 1 or 2 hands. Okay. So part of what makes the hero's journey exciting for me is that I'm an actor. And so part of my acting training was the method acting from Stanislavski's method. And he talks about the 4 questions. And what's interesting is these 4 questions also relate to the hero's journey. And I'm going to share those 4 questions with you just to give you a chance to kind of think about them. And maybe think about how they relate to your life. The 4 questions that an actor approaches a role with, and they're also the 4 questions that follow the hero or the heroine through their journey are, who am I? Why am I here? Where do I come from? And where am I going? So just take a minute to breathe those in. They're very powerful questions, I found. And they're kind of our spiritual questions, aren't they? So, according to Christopher Vogel, the hero's journey is a pattern of narrative identified by Joseph Campbell that appears in drama, storytelling, myth, religious ritual, and psychological development, describing the typical adventure of the archetype known as the hero. The person that goes out and achieves great deeds on behalf of the group, the tribe, or the civilization. Now that's kind of a fancy way of saying that the hero is the star of the show, the star of a story, a movie, a myth, or if we're approaching our own lives, the hero is the star of our lives. Now from that point of view, how many of you see yourself as the hero or heroine of your own life? Can we make that stretch? Maybe think about it. There's a lot of talk these days about story, right? We're hearing people, what I've heard a lot lately is we need to let go of our stories. We need to be able to move forward, we need to let go of our stories. Oh, you've just got to let go of that and get on with it. And a lot of us, including myself, I can understand people saying that because a lot of us have used certain parts of our stories to stay stuck, to keep us from moving forward and realizing our greatness and discovering our bliss and really living our dreams. But I'm not sure that just letting go of our stories is the answer. I think that really might be throwing out the baby with the bathwater. I've come to believe that what we really need to do is to recognize our stories and to really get that we are the hero of our lives. We are the hero of our own stories. We're the star of our lives. And unity teaches us that we are a unique expression of God. And our uniqueness is what makes us the star of our lives and what we have to share with the world. So I wrote in my journal many years ago to really embody, own, and celebrate all that I am, every experience, all that I actually do and have done and have been through, to actually feel it in my bones, in each and every cell of my body, in every aspect of my being. That is a fierce reality. And I think that feeling, when I wrote it down in my journal, came out of my years as an actor. Kind of came out of the 4 questions. When I would use those 4 questions to approach a role, I really learned that to make a character work, to really make it come to life, and to make it believable for myself and the audience, I had to ask those 4 questions, and those 4 questions helped me fall in love with the character. And I played some pretty nasty characters. And I always found that moment when I fell in love with them, when I understood what they did from a deep level, from a place of compassion. And I struggled sometimes with the really good characters because my acting teachers would say, it's not real. Where's the struggle? Where's the flaw? What's going on underneath this character? So even with those heroic good characters, it's the flaw, it's the struggle that makes them interesting. So, and I learned the same thing when I was writing plays, that it was the struggle to overcome the frailties and the flaws that really made the character interesting. It really is what made the character heroic. And if you think about your own life, I know we've all had struggles and difficulties that we've gone through. And that's your hero. That's your strength. That's what you have to share with the world. I wrote that fierce quote in my journal when I was in the midst of my own healing process. I really moved to the point, certain physical things had gone on with me, where I was not able to continue to pursue my acting career. And through the desire to heal myself, I realized that the most important role I had to play in my life was me. And so I had to delve into that dark side of me to really come out whole. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. I'd like to share with you a little bit of my hero's journey. Would that be okay? Good. Now, some of you already heard part of my story when I was here on Mother's Day. I shared about my mom and some of what I went through with her, how close we were when I was young, and how much I loved her, and how things seemed to fall apart. And there was a divorce, and she threw me out of the house with my brother to go live with my father. So what I did after she threw me out of the house, like we all do, I did my best to move forward. I struggled through high school, feeling out of place and disconnected, partly because from an early age I knew that I was gay, and that made me different. And yet there was something more, so I knew there was something more. I felt disconnected, and I just didn't feel like I fit in. And I found escape and solace in drugs, and salvation in music. Soul music is what I loved. I loved to sing and dance. Soul Train was my favorite show. I felt like I was this black boy trapped inside a white body in a white world. And I loved Aretha Franklin and the Jackson 5, and I especially loved Diana Ross. In fact, it was Diana Ross who really saved my life. She was able to shake me out of a really suicidal depression that I was in when I was in my sophomore year that was facilitated by a bad acid trip. So that's really where I was at that point in my life, just trying to find my way through. I was driving to school. I did not have my driver's license yet, but the way my life ended up, living with my father, he was working all week long in Sacramento. I was living in Southern California. And there was nobody to take me to school. My brother had his own car and his own friends, and he didn't want to deal with his cranky little brother. And so my father would give me the keys and say, you only have your learner's permit, so don't get pulled over by the police, but you got to get yourself to school. So I was depressed and sad. I had this bad acid trip that made me think I was going crazy, which I kind of thought anyway with all the struggle that was going on. And it was a foggy day, and I got out of bed and made myself my little breakfast and was driving down. We lived up on a hill in the Palos Verdes Peninsula. And just so depressed and sad, and I'd been that way really for quite a while. It had been months. And I just felt like there was no one that I could talk to, that I felt a connection with. And I turned on my little radio. That was back when our radios used to have push buttons in the car, remember that? And I pushed the button, and Diana Ross came on. Ain't no mountain high enough. If you need me, call me, no matter where you are. And it was the long version. I don't know if any of you know the long version. It's got a whole separate section in between. I'd never heard the long version before. And just hearing the song made me start to feel better. But when suddenly this new verse came in, right as the clouds started to clear as I went down the hill, I felt my heart start to open. And I just began to cry. I felt that somebody somewhere, because I'd loved Diana since I Hear Symphony came out when I was a kid. And there was this voice just telling me that things were going to be okay. And I literally had to pull over to the side of the road because I couldn't see it because I was crying so hard. And I sat there and cried for probably 10 minutes. And it was a change. Something changed in me, a release of the grief that I've been holding on to. And so when a friend of mine invited me to go see Diana Ross in Las Vegas at the end of my senior year, I had a choice to make because this weekend was on the same weekend of my high school graduation. And so I said to myself, do I want to sit in the hot sun in a funny hat with a lot of people I don't like, or do I want to go see Diana Ross in Las Vegas? So it wasn't much of a decision. I went. I went to see her in Las Vegas, and as spirit or fate or my hero's journey would have it, we were able to sit right up front. My friend and I said, okay, we're going to sit up front. We borrowed some money from his dad so we could give the maitre d' a big tip. And we were sitting right on the stage with our elbows there, watching this, to me, was a goddess. There she was, sparkling and singing and in the joy of being alive. And I thought to myself, that's what I want to do. Just to actually see someone else doing it, I thought, I can do that. So when she came out after one of her many costume changes, we know she changes her costumes a lot, she was about to sing her hit song, Love Hangover, and I was like, snapping my fingers and getting ready, and she looked at me and invited me to come up on stage and dance. So I didn't take a second thought. I jumped up, ran up there, and I'm shaking my booty with her. I was doing the bump with Diana Ross, and she loved it. The whole audience loved it. Everyone stood up by the time I was finished, and I just felt love. I felt myself being bathed in love. She gave me her scarf at the end of the show. Afterwards, her dancers talked to me outside. They said, oh, where do you study dance? I said, oh, I've never studied. Soul Train's my favorite show. That's where I got all my moves. And so they said, well, you should study. They were all from LA, so they said, you need to go to this studio. You should start taking ballet. And so suddenly, my life had a meaning. It had direction. And so I started studying acting. I learned my 4 questions. I did what I needed to do. And when the opportunity came, I moved to New York to follow my dreams. And my career was going. Things were going great. And then my body began to rebel. I had an injury. I hurt my foot at an audition. It wasn't healing. I was on crutches for a while. Then my hip gave out. My whole body was just saying, you can't move forward. There's something else going on. I dealt with doctors, and doctors were no help. And when one doctor said, okay, you got to go get a bone scan on this foot, I'm going to give you a prescription, I left the doctor's office, and it was really clear to me that there was this medical thing that hadn't given me any help, that I could go down that, or I could trust my inner voice, which knew that there was something else going on with me. I was reading Shirley MacLaine's book, Dancing in the Light. And she was talking about her work at the Light Institute with Chris Griscom, who does this multi-dimensional work, she calls it, and it's really, you go and you experience your past lives. And so I tore up my prescription from the doctor, went home, called the Light Institute, and I went for 4 days of intensive past life regression. You lie on a couch, and they rub your third eye, and they really get you in touch with your higher power. And these pictures begin to come into your mind. I saw myself as this Indian medicine woman in the Arizona area who used to be able to stand on the earth and breathe the energy into her body. And I could feel it lying there on the table. And she would say, we need to go 2 days in that direction and we will find buffalo. We will find food. And I had a dream where I was a priest who sang Gregorian chant, who had a very strong connection with God. And many, many lies came up. But the most important thing that happened, well, two very important things happened during that time in New Mexico. Number one was that I realized that I was more than this body. That this body that I was living now was one story, one hero's journey that I was living, but that I'd lived these other lives and I'd had these other experiences. The most powerful thing about that was at the end of each life, you move out of your body. They have you experience your death, and you move into that all-loving embrace of your higher power. And from that point of view, you look back at your life and you see that that life had meaning. Even those lives that were filled with pain and struggle, that they had meaning, that they had a growth experience for my soul. And the other really important thing was that connection with the higher power. I left there knowing that there was a power greater than me that was there and that was on my side. And so what happened is I went back to my acting, I went back to my career, but my healing wasn't through. And I kind of knew that. And so I got into therapy, began looking at some of these feelings that were still coming up, and I went to an inner child workshop with John Bradshaw. Anyone remember him? He did some very powerful work with the 12 steps and with healing and addiction and the family system. And it was during that workshop that I experienced memories of childhood sexual abuse from my father. And wow, that was not something that I expected. And as it came up, it led to a very powerful healing process. I wrote my father a number of letters. First of all, thinking that if I could somehow explain it clear enough about how angry I was and how wrong this was, that somehow he was going to write back and say, "Oh my goodness, Karsten, you're right. What could I have been thinking?" and say he was sorry, and somehow that would make it all right and go away. Of course, he didn't say that. It was a lot of denial, and it was a lot of typical things that made sense for an alcoholic and for a person who had the challenges that he had. Getting that letter back threw me into probably what that little boy would have felt at 6 years old when that happened. Extreme fear and anxiety. I mean, what happened to me back then was that, and it's so funny, when the memories came up, so much of my childhood made sense. Why I felt so out of place. And it wasn't just that I was gay. It was that I wasn't really in my body. When the memories came up, what I realized was there was a 6-month period that I had blacked out. Only thing I really remembered was that I was in 3rd grade one moment, and the next moment, it was the end of summer, as I was about to start 4th grade. The front door had slammed. I felt shaken back into my body, and wow. And so an awful lot of my healing was about getting back into my body. Writing that letter to him where I expressed my anger and my, what I needed from him and what he didn't give me, helped get me back in my body, helped me to express what I had gone silent with at that early age. And when I got the letter back from him, with all his denials and everything, it took me about 6 weeks to just feel the anxiety and the feelings, but then I knew it was ready for me to sit down and write another letter. Not for him this time, but for me. To say to him that, no, these are excuses, this is who I am today, and this is not good enough. And if you can't own what you did, I don't want you in my life. And that was when real healing began. I focused on myself. It's a long journey. And I knew, after getting rid of the rage, banging pillows and therapy and all the stuff that I needed to do, I knew that I also needed to forgive. And I also was able to own that forgiveness was not something that I could just decide to do. Forgiveness is a grace that's granted by God, and it happens in time. But what I could do was be willing. And it was my 40th birthday, and my friends had all gotten together and bought me my first CD players when CDs had come out. And there I was after I went to the store and picked out the one I wanted and came home and set it all up. I thought, oh my goodness, I was home by myself. What's the first album I'm going to play on my new, or my first CD that I'm going to play on my new CD player? My friend had already given me a bunch of CDs. So I picked out Aretha Franklin's Greatest Hits and put on Bridge Over Troubled Water. I don't know if any of you know her version of Bridge Over Troubled Water. Forget about it. The best. And I put it on and began to listen. And my father was in the room. Because my father loved music. I got my love of music from my father. I remember when I brought home that album and put it on, he went, wow, who's that? He loved her. And so I felt him there, and I felt forgiveness. I began to realize through my process of what most of us agree is, from our civilized point of view, is horrendous. A father who could do that to his son. But I realized through my process of forgiveness that there are no victims or villains here. That there's just human beings struggling with what it means to be part of this thing that we're in, this evolution of consciousness and spirit moving into matter. And another powerful healing happened after I got the call that my father had passed. It had been maybe 8 years since I wrote the letter, and I had not been in contact with him, and yet our relationship continued, like with that moment with Aretha Franklin, like with dreams I had when once again I would be confronting him. One dream when I had when I was actually lying in bed with him, and it was not a sexual dream, but it was a cozy, close dream. When I was a little boy, I used to, when I'd get scared, I'd run out of my bed and I'd jump in bed in between my parents, and it was the safest place I knew. And I asked him, did this really happen? Because there was always that questioning, am I making this up? Did it really happen? And there was a dream when he said, yes, it did. And I said, thank you for telling me. He said, you're welcome. And it was a moment of healing. And then when I got the call from my sister, she said, are you sitting down? And I said, yes, but I really wasn't. Yeah. Because I figured, what can anyone tell me at this point? But she said, Dad's dead. And I felt this huge sense of relief. Relief. Because that little kid inside me knew that he was safe, that he was okay. And the next thought that came in was such a sense of peace and relief for him, because I thought, oh good, he's out of the pain. He's out of the pain, because I remembered my past life regression, when I would go to the end of each lifetime, and no matter how painful the struggle was, when I moved out of the body, I was embraced by spirit and filled with forgiveness. And it was so clear to me in that moment the pain he must have been in to have committed those acts, the struggle. And then the next bit of healing came when we went down to his funeral, to the community he lived in right on the border of Mexico. He kind of removed himself from society at the end of his life. And me and my sister and my brother and my mom arrived. They'd been divorced for many, many years, but we all knew we needed to go. When I wrote the letter to my father, both the letters, I had CC'd many people, because that was part of my healing. I wanted to bring this out of the closet, not have it be a shameful, hidden thing that was between the two of us. And so I sent copies to my mother, my brother, my sister, and other people, friends and family that were around at that time. Some of them may have known, some of them should have known, but everyone closed their eyes. And it was a process of healing for the whole family, me bringing that out. Things came out of the closet, and everyone began to change, and some other people began to have memories of what had happened. And we arrived at the funeral, and it was packed. People loved my father. My father was a good man, in spite of his demons that caused him to do what he did. He was loved, he was compassionate, he had a caring for people, and when we arrived at the funeral that final day, people gravitated to me. I felt love coming from them because, as they said, wow, you're just like your dad. There was something in me that I got from my father that caused these people just to love me, to embrace me with love. And I thought to myself, wow, my dad gave me a lot. He gave me this crazy initiation, which opened my heart and caused me to go on this hero's journey that I'm still on. But he also gave me a lot of good things. And I think that's one thing that I've learned from my hero's journey, is that our parents do give us everything they have. All the good and all the bad, because that's what they got from their parents. And they took it and did the best they could with that, and moved a little bit forward. We take what we get from our parents and move a little bit forward. And so, the end of that day, after we put my father in the grave, the sun was setting, and suddenly his good friend, who was also my good friend, who he also had molested when we were kids, called me outside, and he was part of this healing too, and I remembered we still, we discussed it a lot, what it meant and what our relationship with my father meant and what that was all about. And it's not that I have any answers, I have my own feelings, what I went through. But he called me outside, he said, Cardi, come look at this. And there was this, I guess it was something that had come off from one of the naval stations, but it was this rocket that had shot across the sky with this big streaming light. And he said, it's your dad, he's going on his journey. And I felt this letting go. And I consciously said, Dad, I let you go, and I bless you. And so he moved on. And I realize, and have continued to realize, that he is a hero in his life. I've forgiven him. What we also learned as all this began to unfold is that he was molested by his mother for many years. And so this goes back and back and back. Who knows how many generations. I mean, when I watch nature specials, I get so much information because that's where we come from. Not long ago we were running around on the plains eating each other, right? And these energies that flow through us, we're still trying to conceive of them. So much of my work with clients, my own healing work, my yoga and meditation, and the work I do with clients, the Karsten energy massage that I developed, which is really about feeling people's energy. It's interesting, when I began working with clients after my dad died and after my mom died, it was almost like an energy had been released from me, and now it was time for me to really step into my body. And all the yoga and retreats that I'd done, I knew I wanted to work one-on-one with people, and I wasn't quite sure how it would work. I knew it had to do with yoga and getting into the body. And what happened is my hands began to show me really an energetic body work technique that was really working with the chakras, the energy centers. And there was always a moment when I worked on people, because it got me totally out of the head. I didn't have to think. A moment when I would work on people, when I would fall in love with them. Similar to that 4 questions and the work with the character, a moment when I fell in love with the character. It's a moment when the ego stuff melts away and I see who's there in front of me. This hero. And in seeing them and in falling in love with them, it's also me falling in love and accepting myself. And so what I want to do, what I want to leave you with today, is that you are the hero of your life. And the wonderful thing about those 4 questions is that you use them not just in studying the character, but you use them at every new point in the story. When the character needs to do something or needs to take an action, you need to get clear as to what's happening with that character in that point. And it always gives you a clear motivation as to what's next. So these 4 questions I invite you to use in your life. If you're having a struggle, if something's up for you, you're not sure what's next, stop and ask yourself, who am I? Why am I here? Where do I come from? And where am I going? And I'd like to answer those questions for you in a way of saying thank you for inviting me here today and listening and allowing me to share this with you. Who am I? I am God expressing as this individual person. Where do I come from? I come from Source. Why am I here? I'm here to share my truth. And where am I going? I'm going home. And home is here. Here and here.
Wow.
Thank you.